Shalom, everybody. So there is a new White House strategy to combat anti-Semitism, and this is what I want to talk about today. So let's talk about that for a little bit, because it just came out. I think it's important. On May 25th, the White House unveiled a new strategy to combat anti-Semitism in America in a comprehensive 60-page document. In it, we have an opening statement by President Joe Biden, and in his own words, and I quote, "Toward that aim, my administration has developed the first U.S. national strategy to counter anti-Semitism." By the way, if you appreciate my videos, would you please consider subscribing and giving us thumbs up and hitting the notification bell so that you won't miss one single video in the future. All right, so I continue with the quote by President Joe Biden. Back to the statement. "It represents the most ambitious and comprehensive U.S. government-led effort to fight anti-Semitism in American history. It also brings Americans together, regardless of our backgrounds and beliefs, to stand united against the hate, racism, bigotry, and violence that have long haunted our nation." Let me continue with a statement. "The strategy outlines a whole-of-society effort to combat anti-Semitism, including unprecedented, coordinated, and bold actions that will be implemented across government agencies, as well as calls to action for public officials, private sector leaders, and Americans from every sector, industry, and walk of life." Close quote. Well, friends, in principle, I have to applaud that statement. It sounds really good. It seems to show that a great effort is being made to combat the oldest hatred. After all, it is extremely alarming to know that 2.4% of the U.S. population is the victim of 63% of all hate crimes in America. You heard me. 2.4% of the U.S. population, that's the Jewish people, are victim of 63% of all hate crimes in America. This task force is part of a broader committee known as the Interagency Policy Committee on Antisemitism, Islamophobia, and Related Forms of Bias and Discrimination. It has been tasked with combating anti-Semitism as the first order of business and has partnered with a myriad of various organizations to do so on as many levels as possible. And again, we should all be very encouraged, if indeed this new endeavor truly leads to change. Sadly, I have my doubts. When it comes to anti-Semitism, the number one challenge is education. And for those interested in fighting the beast of Jew hatred, there are more than enough resources online, in printed form, and even in person. So it's available if you look for it. Additionally, the task force have announced that in 2024, and I quote them, "In 2024, the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum will launch the first ever U.S.-based Holocaust Education Research Center," close quote. There's a great potential for continued education on the Holocaust and its ramifications into the 21st century. This should equip people to debunk history revision and Holocaust denial. And that's very, very needed right now, unfortunately. Again, education is available, but it will only change the landscape if people who learn also take action. It is not the first time that words have been spoken against the evil of anti-Semitism. It probably won't be the last, as things continue to increase. Politicians from both sides of the aisle have claimed multiple times that America will not tolerate any anti-Semitism, and that anti-Semitism will be punished by law. Sadly, these have been spoken words, but followed by very little action, unless the event that led to the statements was important enough to draw the attention of the general public. Like, for instance, the tragedy of the Pittsburgh synagogue, the murders in 2018. Even then, not enough has really been done. Another of the greatest challenges in combating anti-Semitism is identifying acts of Jew hatred themselves. When a man took hostages in a synagogue on Shabbat in Colleyville, Texas in 2022, the FBI immediately came out to denounce the crime, but without declaring any anti-Semitic connection whatsoever. In their defense, they quickly came back and changed their story. But originally, they said it was not anti-Semitic. It was just so bizarre. Many incidents take place in America on a daily basis, and when the Jewish community witnesses the lack of recognition and lack of accountability or any enforcement, they simply don't report anti-Semitism anymore. Why would they if nothing or very little gets changed or done? As the White House is promising action against anti-Semitism like never before, as they said, they have an opportunity to put their money where their mouth is. Let me give you an example of something that just took place. On May 12th, there was a graduation ceremony for the law students class of 2023 at City University of New York, CUNY. The school has a reputation already for being very, very liberal, which is their right in our beautiful country. They got into trouble last year for letting graduate Nurdin Kaswani, who was called for the destruction of Israel and invited people to globalize the Intifada. They got in trouble for that. So one would think that this year they would have tried to be a little less controversial, let alone not so anti-Jewish. Enter Fatima Musa Mohammed to deliver the graduation speech at CUNY 2023 commencement ceremony. Friends, her 12-minute speech was laced with racism, critical race theory, and anti-Semitism. A graduation speech is an awesome opportunity to encourage, challenge, and inspire the graduating class. It should be seen as an important responsibility and a tremendous honor. Her speech turned out to be none of that. Unless, of course, she wanted to encourage people to ostracize and demonize Israel and the Jewish people. It is a sad day we live in when people use any platform they can to denigrate the Jewish state with anti-Semitic tropes. CUNY trains the next generation of legal experts, lawyers, judges. Where is our world going? Some of the statements that Ms. Mohammed said were very, very controversial. Let me just quote her with her own words. Open quote. "The continual white supremacy that continues to oppress and suppress people in this nation." Close quote. Or, open quote, "I want to celebrate CUNY Law as one of the few, if not the only, law school to make a public statement defending the rights of its students to organize and speak out against Israeli settlers' colonialism." Close quote. Or this one, "This is the law school that passed and endorsed BDS on a student and faculty level." Close quote. Or this, open quote, "Israel continues to indiscriminately rain bullets and bombs on worshippers, murdering the old, the young, attacking even funerals and graveyards as it encourages lynch mobs to target Palestinian homes and businesses, as it imprisons its children, as it continues its project of settlers' colonialism, expelling Palestinians from their home, carrying the ongoing Nakba." Close quote. Nakba means the catastrophe. Another one, open quote, "Leading the fight against capitalism, racism, imperialism, and Zionism around the world." Speaking of CUNY, of course. Close quote. She also declared, "We must practice a discipline of truth and courage." While I agree with that statement, I'm not certain that this is what she had just accomplished in her passionate speech. I don't think that's what she did. There are a few things that trouble me with her graduation speech, and the reason for my discomfort is the choice of venue for such a declaration. It is absolutely true that we must uphold freedom of speech in America. Otherwise, we become a police state with no freedoms at all. So I agree with that statement. Yet, free speech being upheld should never occur if and when it places people at risk for their lives. Some questions we need to ask ourselves after listening to the words of Ms. Mohammed are those. Was her speech encouraging and positive, seeking to make a better world? Why was she wearing a Palestinian scarf around her neck? Or why was there so much cheering from the student body throughout the whole speech? Or of all our cries against injustice in the world, was Israel disproportionately represented? Or were all our complaints about Israel killing Palestinians accurate, factual? Or how did the speech receive faculty approval prior to being delivered? Or did she change it at the last minute? Those are all questions that we need to ask ourselves. In their defense, the CUNY Board of Trustees made a statement in which they clearly condemned the speech. And I quote their statement, open quote, "The remarks by a student selected speaker at the CUNY Law School graduation unfortunately fall into the category of hate speech, as they were a public expression of hate toward people and communities based on their religion, race, or political affiliation." Close quote. I applaud them for coming out so quickly to denounce this hate-filled speech. Bravo. Now, circling back to the new White House strategy to counter anti-Semitism, what took place at the CUNY 2023, what took place there at the commencement ceremony is a perfect example of the normalization of anti-Semitism, and that it falls into the incidents that the White House needs to identify, analyze, and denounce. But beyond denouncing the hate, we must start bringing those who promote it to justice and have them pay for their crimes. Maybe I live in a utopian universe, but I still have faith in the human spirit. My prayers go out to our current administration for the hard work that lies ahead of them. Friends, this is all I have for this week. As always, I ask that you would subscribe and share with your friends. And until next time, I say shalom and be blessed.